So I'm a person who's been thunderstruck in sophomore high school geometry class by the concept of the point. We had moved from a multicultural, diverse city into a suburb. It was a little plain, and I was schlepping my way through classes in an extremely well-regarded high school and sat down in geometry class. And the first thing they explain is that all geometry is based on this hypothesis, this concept, the point, which has no depth or height and has location only. We represent it when we put a dot on the paper, and out of that, everything follows. And it made me realize that everything is representational. So when I ran into the wave-particle duality, that same sense of wonder and awe came to me. The wave-particle duality says very basic building blocks of reality as we know it is both a particle, a thing, and a wave, a process. And we can't see both of them at once. When we're measuring them, the observer affects the outcome of the experiment. And I was thinking, well, why not? Why can't we hold both those things in our minds at once? Maybe not our minds. Maybe we just need to breathe. Things that seem to be contradictions. So I wanted to apply that to other forms of thinking, other places in my life, because so many representations, so many analogies from which we derive the conclusions on which we base our entire life systems come between disciplines. There's computational, science, art, aesthetics. Could we not inspire ourselves as we construct the meaning and the decisions of our lives from any variety of disciplines? Perhaps we could reverse engineer something like Auguste Kekule did, falling asleep in front of a nice warm fire. The chemist in 1861 had an image of a very classical archetype, a snake swallowing its tail, from which he got boron. Why not think about the dualities and hold them all together? One, for instance, would be in the realm of happiness. You can be happy or you can't. I got really interested in what it would take for happiness to be a part of your life. Some say, yes, you can have it in this life. Some say, absolutely not. It's simply not available. Money. Have to have money to be happy. No point in having too much money. It makes you unhappy. You might find yourself kind of at one end or another of that spectrum, but in reality, I think we're all in a kind of range. It turns out, for instance, from the work of Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton at University of British Columbia, that if we're spending our money in pro-social ways, ways that are of our choice, contributing to where we find meaning and beauty in our lives, we have more happiness. More is not more with money. Up to a certain point, beyond the poverty level, up to a certain point, indeed, more money is more happiness. Beyond that, there's a great debate about exactly how much more. 50,000 and over, you get diminishing returns, and then there's, oh no, it's really 75,000, perhaps it's 100,000. Whatever that is, there is a range in which we will find ourselves around money and happiness, or perhaps health. if you are genetically inclined to certain kinds of health or health challenges. There's another duality, nature and nurture. The current thought is about 50%. Determined by genes and up to your choice. But if you have a certain set point in your health, there's a range that can be determined through the interaction, the creative juxtaposition of what you are given and what you choose. Or in the realm, say, of choice. Daniel Gilbert has been doing a great deal of work on this, where it finds out that when we synthesize, when we create our own happiness, a great deal of choice doesn't make us as happy as when we have givens. When we have kind of natural happiness, things that just, why then an enormous amount of choice works for us. So again, there's a range of where we would find ourselves. Our minds play tricks on us. We have psychologically some inclinations toward fooling ourselves and adjusting the way we think of things. Another axis would be that of the work of Daniel Kahneman, who finds out that at one end would be an emphasis on experience, and another end would be an emphasis on memory, a kind of hedonistic versus meaning axis, where very often we're driven by our memory of things, not by our actual experience of things. How things end determine our happiness about them a great deal more than what we were actually experiencing during that time. Say a wonderful vacation that ended abysmally, getting stuck in Chicago for 3 days and having to sleep on the floor while you waited for the snow to stop, affects your memory of that when the actual experience was delightful, and where you would find yourself along that spectrum. The Buddhist tradition tells us that we can, in terms of emotions, replace, say, anger with the practice of loving kindness. And we'll find ourselves within a certain spectrum of that, being able to practice loving kindness, being able to experience happiness as a kind of emotional wave above the essential nature of ourselves at the center, an essential nature perhaps a little bit more like a point, which has at least a location. And we will find in our lives that those move, those spectrum along which we find our meaning and construct our days. I would not want to say that this is simply lines. I would want to remind us that we have, when all those axes go out, whatever they might be for you, they will interconnect. And maybe we are a perfect round red ball of self, but probably more likely we're moving with the different choices and the different circumstances of our lives, and the axes are connecting as a kind of web, so that if, for instance, you have some money, you're in retirement, in a pension, some discretionary money, if you want to make pro-social choices, if the meaning of your life has a lot to do with altruism, you might make some choices about what to do, which is a place that I find considerable happiness, and that's in the realm of socially responsible and sustainable economics. Making the choice to go with other people who are participating in shareholder activism, where you have the legal right to participate in a democratic process which determines, or at least speaks up for your values, your ethics, your sense of what will be the most meaningful and contributory to the world. So I find terrific happiness in the last 10 years worth of shareholder advocacy, in which we find that more and more and more people are putting their money into organizations and financial products which give them a voice, which speak up for values of environmental practice, disclosure of environmental practice, safe and inclusive labor practices, looking at a supply chain to find out whether your shirt or your blouse or your electronic device came from a place where people are being treated fairly. More and more people and more shareholders are getting involved. Bigger percentages of people are voting at annual meetings of corporations in order to bespeak their values. And not only that, but there are more and more dialogues, more and more conversations happening between people about their values with people who have positions of responsibility in multinational corporations. I think a source of depression, especially among young people, is that overwhelming sense that you have no voice, that it's overwhelming, that your world is being dictated by massive entities with economies larger than nations, a sense of not having any power. And here is a place that we can feel that we have a voice and we have an influence. For me, it's based in pragmatism. My grandfather was a student of John Dewey, who in turn was a student of Charles Sanders Peirce. Consider what effects that might conceivably have practical bearings. We conceive an object of our conception to be praxis and practicality. So if we stand in the center of the axes of our choices, and we look at the patterns of energy that we're making in the web around those choices, we're creating new synaptical patterns, new ways of thinking, new ways to change our own choices and perhaps participate in our own evolution, all from, in my own discipline, my own thought, using the wave-particle duality as a way of thinking through things. Thank you so much.